So hey guys, welcome to the new episode of എങ്ങനെയുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. I am Rajeev.
I'm Nikhil.
This is Pillai.
So we are here today to speak about a very special movie called The Killer by David Fincher. So if you guys are thinking ഞങ്ങൾ മലയാളം വിട്ടുപിടിക്കുമൊന്നുമല്ല, it's just that we thought we'll try different segments and different categories. And we thought we'll bring something new to the table today. So today's segment is called India Vittu Pidichalo. So ideally in this segment we are going to be talking about movies which are not from India. So there may be some international movies, there may be some English movies or Hollywood movies which has caught our fancy, and we thought maybe we can watch it and speak about it. So we're going to be talking about The Killer by David Fincher. So in one word, and mind you, all three of us have seen this movie, I think, over the past couple of days, once it came out on Netflix, and we haven't really spoken about it, so we've saved everything for e-podcast. So I think I'll start with Nikhil. Nikhil, one word, did you like it?
Yeah, before you start, I just want to say that നമ്മൾ already 4 episode കഴിഞ്ഞു, the 5th episode ആണ്. You always start with how was it or something. Why don't you start with എങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു?
ശരിയാ, നമുക്ക് പ്രോഗ്രാമിൻ്റെ പേര് മാനിക്കണമല്ലോ.
ഫെയർ എനഫ്. അപ്പോൾ എങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു നിഖിൽ?
എനിക്കിഷ്ടമായി. എനിക്ക് ഇറ്റ്സ് നോട്ട് ദ ബെസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ഡേവിഡ് ഫിൻച്ചർ പേഴ്സണലി, ബട്ട് ഇറ്റ് വാസ് എ പ്രിറ്റി സ്ട്രേറ്റ് ഫോർവേഡ് മൂവി. ബേസിക്കലി ഒരു റിവെഞ്ച് സ്റ്റോറി, ഒരു ജോൺ വിക്ക് ഒക്കെ പോലെ, ബട്ട് ഇറ്റ് വാസ് വെരി സട്ടിൽ ഇൻ നേച്ചർ.
But before we move forward in this conversation, I think it's important for the listeners to know that this is a spoiler-filled conversation. So, I mean, in general, ഞങ്ങൾ ഏതൊരു പടത്തിനെ പറ്റി സംസാരിക്കുമ്പോഴും ഞങ്ങൾ മോസ്റ്റ്ലി അതിനെ സ്പോയിൽ ചെയ്യാറുണ്ട്. We talk in depth about maybe some of the scenes or the story and how it progresses. So, if you're someone who probably like us finds it important not to know the ending of a story while you watch it, then you should probably tune in back once you've seen the movie. So, sorry Nikhil, continue.
Yeah, as I said, it's basically a revenge story similar to John Wick. And for a movie which is named The Killer, ഇതിലെ action ഒക്കെ കുറച്ച് കുറവാണ്. But whatever action was there in this movie, it was pretty intense. And overall, ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ 1 minute പറയണ overall I would recommend this movie.
അവൻ 1 minute എന്നല്ല പറഞ്ഞു, in one word എന്നാ ചോദിച്ചത്.
One word. One word ആണെങ്കിൽ I recommend this movie. അല്ലോ, അത് 1 word അല്ലല്ലോ. ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു.
പിള്ളை എങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു?
I did not like it.
Oh Jesus, let's go.
No, I was very surprised actually. ഞാൻ അങ്ങനെ പൊതുവെ I like not to know anything about movies before I watch them. ഞാൻ ട്രെയിലർ റിവ്യൂസ് ഒന്നും നോക്കാറില്ല. But knowing that it's a David Fincher film, I was completely ready to like it, because David Fincherന് ഞാൻ ഏതൊക്കെ സിനിമ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ എനിക്ക് എല്ലാം ഇഷ്ടമാണ്. ഗ്രേറ്റ് ഫിൽം മേക്കർ. Which is why I was very surprised by how bland this movie was. But we'll come to that later.
Yeah. So എന്നോട് ചോദിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ എനിക്കിഷ്ടമായി പടം, എനിക്കിഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു. It didn't have, I mean, David Fincher obviously famous for making thrillers and famous for making these kinds of movies where it's a little bit of you look into the mind of someone and kind of makes you think, and a little bit dark and gritty, these kind of movies, especially famously like whatever he's made. അങ്ങനെ വെച്ചാൽ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ it was a little different from the things that he's made, but ultimately it is a thriller, and he's kind of tried to stick to what he does best, I feel. Overall it was an enjoyable watch. I did like it, if to put it frankly. So I think we can go a little bit more into the movie and probably talk about David Fincher as a director and what are some of the previous works of his that you guys are familiar with, and some of the things that you liked and stuff like that. By the way, Diwali weekend aanu guys, so forgive some of the disturbances and padakambuttal in the background. But yeah, go on.
I think all of us are familiar with Seven.
Yeah.
Seven and Fight Club, I think, are his most famous, or at least the classics among his filmography.
Yeah.
And Curious Case of Benjamin Button is also another famous one. Zodiac and Social Network, which is something different from what he usually does. I have not seen Mank, which was his last film. Neither have I seen Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. So a couple of films of his I've missed, but the films by which he's recognized, I've seen those and I really like them. Of course, Fight Club is great, but I personally like Seven the best of all of his works, because I think that's where you see a lot of David Fincher, right? There is a very specific color tone that he prefers using, which is common between Seven and between Fight Club. There's also a lot of close-up shots and a lot of cuts that are very peculiar to David Fincher. There is the sort of very dark and gritty mood that he creates, which Seven really brings forward. And it's also conversations between characters. So in Seven, you have Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt trying to figure out this case. And with Fight Club, you have Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. So I think that aspect remains common in his work, right? Where a lot of a lot of it is dialogue. The dialogue really sets the mood for the characters. Social Network is different, I think, because that was more Aaron Sorkin than David Fincher when it came to the dialogue. But generally, I really like the way that he builds character interactions and how those character interactions sort of fill out the story. And which is precisely why I didn't like this film. Because one, you are reliant entirely on one single person who has very few interactions with other characters. And I was very surprised because I usually like Michael Fassbender as a performer. But I don't think he had the depth to carry, or I don't know what acting choices he was asked to make. It just didn't seem like a way of acting which could convincingly take us through an entire film when most of it is just based on one character.
Okay.
This movie was made based on a graphic novel, a French graphic novel. What I understood, it has some 5-6 volume, and this movie is the first volume of that, or it's adapted from the first volume. So I think David Fincher tried to do it similar to a graphic novel where it's divided into chapters. Like if you see, there's 6 chapters and an epilogue. So I like that aspect of this movie where it's something different here, where he has tried to split the movie into 6 chapters, and each chapter for me is similar to each other. So each chapter has the same structure as every other chapter. If you see, each chapter starts with his voiceover, and it ends with he says a particular voiceover. If I've written it somewhere, yeah, stick to your plan, anticipate, don't improvise, trust no one. So he almost in all the chapters, I think this voiceover is there. I like the fact that he has tried to make each chapter similar to each other. I like that aspect.
What about some of his other films that you've seen, and what do you like?
Fight Club was one movie which was hyped up too much, and to me, when I saw it, so I've seen it long back, ആ സമയത്ത് ഞാൻ കണ്ടപ്പോൾ I felt it was too much overhyped. ഞാനത് കണ്ടിട്ട് എനിക്ക് അത്ര ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടില്ല as much as it was hyped ആ സമയത്ത്. So I don't know, if I rewatch now, maybe I might like it, but ഞാൻ ആദ്യം അത് കണ്ടപ്പോൾ I didn't like it as much. For me, the favorite would be, like I think Pillai said, Seven was good, Zodiac was good. Yeah, all the thriller type movies which he did was really good. Social Network I've seen once, but I didn't know it was David Fincher's. ഞാൻ ഈ പോഡ്കാസ്റ്റിന് വേണ്ടി കണ്ടപ്പോഴാണ് ഞാൻ ഇത് ഡേവിഡ് ഫിഞ്ചേഴ്സിൻ്റെ ആണെന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയ.
Yeah, because that's very different in flavor. Yeah. I didn't realize that it was David Fincher's. Because I think Aaron Sorkin's script is so, it stands out so much that I think we associate it more with him than David Fincher.
Recently, this animated series, അത് ഡേവിഡ് ഫിഞ്ചറിൻ്റെ അല്ലേ പ്രൊഡക്ഷൻ, this Love, Sex and Robots?
Yeah, I think he's directed one episode in that.
And he was the executive producer.
Yeah, he's the executive producer. He's been the executive producer for quite some, I think, quite a few of the other series and shows and stuff like that. And moreover, I think before he started off his career as a film director, I think he used to direct music videos, if I'm not wrong. So I think he's done some famous work previously. So that's how he gained his fame, as I understand. So I think, like you guys mentioned, Seven obviously is one of his most famous movies, and one of the more, like അത് കാണുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ ഇങ്ങനെ കിഡിങ്ങി പോകുന്ന പടങ്ങളിൽ ഒരെണ്ണമാണ് എനിക്ക് സെവൻ. ഐ റിമെമ്പർ വാച്ചിങ് ഇറ്റ്. And very famous scene with the head in the box and things like that. Like you guys mentioned, he's a master of making thrillers. I think very good at it. I think Zodiac after that is what I've seen after Seven, which I really liked. In Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Social Network are two of the movies which I think he tried to do something different at that point of time in his career. And like you guys mentioned, Social Network completely different from anything he's done before. Girl with the Dragon Tattoo actually has good acclaim, I think, but I've actually never seen it, or I've never been able to sit down and watch it. In fact, before this pod I thought I'd have a look, but it's unfortunately not available on any of the platforms. I think Gone Girl is something you guys didn't mention, but I think for me Gone Girl is his favorite movie. I mean, my favorite movie of his that he's made. I really enjoyed Gone Girl. Like from the moment it starts, the way the story is narrated, and the way he brings out the kind of psycho that she is, put as in how Rosamund Pike is being portrayed in the movie, or that character. I think that was really great. I mean, this was one of the movies where, because in those movies you also see korchoru funny aspect under in certain scenes. Like, it's a serious movie, but also there's some comical bits to it, which is very nice. Speaking about which, I think Killer also, I noticed there are some comical elements which he's tried to bring up in like a very serious scene to kind of try to make it light and stuff like that. So overall, I think, I kind of like that aspect of the movie. So speaking about the killer as such, first thing is I don't know if you guys have seen this, but this movie is solely dependent on this particular character, right? It's almost as if everything is from his perspective and you are literally in his mind. So you're kind of sitting there and you're watching, or you're hearing his thoughts, you're hearing what he says. Very few characters in the whole movie. You're really not seeing a lot of them speak. Even when they do speak, it's very minimal, like the kind of interactions that he has with them. So that way it's like purely dependent on this one person, and it's like in his mind. So direct parallel, if I can draw, is to Mukundan Unni Associates. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite movies last year.
Yeah, same. Pillai nee kandittundho?
Really good.
Yeah, I have
seen
it. But I don't know if I agree with this comparison.
So Mukundan Unni Associates, I mean, it's one of those few Malayalam movies where I've seen where the movie primarily lies on or inside the mind, or it's inside the mind of the character, right? അതായത് the main character കഥ പറയുവാണ് നമ്മളോട്, but at the same time you can hear his thoughts, and then it's very relatable to you in the sense that I feel like we all have thoughts within our heads running all the time, right? നമ്മൾ എന്തൊരു സിറ്റുവേഷൻ കാണുമ്പോഴും ഒരാളോട് സംസാരിക്കുമ്പോഴും you have something else going on in your mind which is speaking to you about it, but that's obviously not what you say to them. So that I found very fresh when I saw Mukundan Unni Associates, and I really like that aspect of the movie. So ഞാൻ ഈ പടം കണ്ടപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് അതാണ് ഓർമ്മ വന്നത്, in the sense that how a lot of these things are inside the mind of this particular character, how he's speaking or how he's telling himself what is being done, and what to do, what not to do, what's the right way, and those instances of doubt and stuff like that. So which I found very interesting, which I really liked, or rather enjoyed in this movie. But having said that, talking about his character, did you guys find how he was very I don't know, he was very hypocritical and also not very good at his job in certain aspects. Do you guys notice that bit? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that was intentional for this movie. It was shown as contradictory. Whatever he's saying is not what he's doing. For example, we should forbid empathy. And empathy is weakness, but then he spares the final guy.
Doesn't really spare her at the end of the day, but...
No, the client he spares, right?
Oh, the client. Right.
And the other... and Dolores. Yeah. So she wanted to die in... to be known that she was dead by accident or something, and he made it sure that it was like that. But yeah.
But he's trying to make it a little comical in that sense, right? Like, ingante oru sequences vechittu. So he's trying to say how, like, I think he was trying to draw that parallel. So how do you guys want to go about this? Do you want to go, maybe, since the movie is divided into chapters, you want to speak about probably the chapters itself and go through that sequence, or you want to speak about something specific?
I don't know if there's much to speaking about the way that it's laid out as chapters, because as far as the story itself goes, there's not much complexity to it, right? You're speaking of a man who did a job, did it badly, and then a hit was ordered on him because he failed the job, and he tries to figure out who ordered the hit and who was involved, and getting rid of them, right? Because they ended up hurting his lover. What I wanted to speak about was that this movie for me belongs to that very particular category, where if you were to ask me what was wrong with the film, I don't have much to say. It's a well-made film, right? There's technically very little wrong with it. If you ask me if it was bad acting, it wasn't. Was it badly shot? No. Was there anything really to call out in the sense of, what doesn't work? Not anything in particular that I could say. But it's something that lacks what, in this sort of scenario where I don't have anything else to say, it lacks heart. I think that's the way to say it, right? It has no spirit to it. Like, I watched the film and it was almost as if I watched nothing at all, right? This is hardly memorable. I don't think I will remember this movie ever. And it's very surprising that that's coming from somebody like Fincher. And what I wanted to ask you was, did it give you that feeling? People often speak about Netflix movies, right? Netflix productions. And that they have a certain kind of... Netflix always expects a certain... they're not all the same films, but there is a tonal consistency across Netflix films which convey a similar feeling for me, which is that you watch a film, not particularly bad, the production quality, etc. is all quite high, but at the end of the film you don't feel like it had any signature to it, right? And I'm not talking only in the sense of being unique, but that sort of emotion that you feel at the end of having watched something, which was, I think, completely lacking in this film. And I would like to know if either of you felt invested while watching it, which I did not at all.
For me, I felt it like nee parna vale, the movie when it starts, I didn't feel like it started like a movie. I don't know if you guys noticed, the movie starts directly like a series. For me, a movie will be like, it starts with like endengilum, it will be written like presented by or something like that, and then slowly the movie starts. Instantly it starts. Maybe it's a OTT release, that's why it's something like this. For me, it didn't feel like a movie had started. So അത് തുടങ്ങിയ സമയത്ത് I felt a little bit disconnect when I saw this movie.
I mean, it's interesting you bring it up, but I actually made a point of this, and since we are speaking about English movies today, this is one thing I really like about non-Indian movies, is the fact that the titles are not that long. Like, it does not take up your whole bloody 4-5 minutes of your time.
No, I am not talking about the stuff we see in Malayalam movie, like thank God, പിന്നെ കുറേ acknowledgement, ആൾക്കാരെ പറയുന്നത്. I'm not talking about that. That part is not, but let's say if you see a Gladiator സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യണ തന്നെ ഒരു മ്യൂസിക് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ട് പതുക്കെ ആ ഗ്ലാഡിയേറ്ററിൻ്റെ ഇതൊക്കെ വന്നിട്ട് ആ ഒരു it feels like it's a movie. Maybe we see movies, we are seeing all the movies like this, that it feels like a movie. For me, ഇത് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്തപ്പോൾ it didn't feel like a movie. That's what I meant here.
എനിക്ക് നീ പറഞ്ഞ മനസ്സിലായി. So I just added on to your point that since we are speaking about English movies, like I like the fact that, you know, ഇതിൽ അങ്ങനെ വെറുതെ ഉള്ള കണ്ട കുറേ പേരൊക്കെ കാണിച്ച് ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടിക്കുന്നില്ല ആരും. I mean, English movies do show all these names, but it's towards the end of the movie where they show a long list of credits, right? So that is something I appreciate, because you're not, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm not a patient person, but I don't really appreciate that, you know, I have to sit through millions of names for no particular reason whatsoever.
Can you imagine cinema തുടങ്ങുക നന്ദി It's so weird that we do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it used to be fine when it was not every movie calling out the same set of people. ആൻഡ് മാക്സിമം അവരെന്താ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടാവുക, അവർ വല്ല ഫേസ്ബുക്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ ട്രെയിലർ ഷെയർ ചെയ്യുകയോ അങ്ങനെ എന്തെങ്കിലുമൊക്കെ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടാവുള്ളൂ. പക്ഷെ അതിന് നന്ദി മോഹൻലാൽ, നന്ദി മമ്മൂട്ടി, നന്ദി. It's always that order also.
At this point, I think it's also reached a stage where ഇവരിപ്പോൾ നന്ദി പറഞ്ഞില്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് പ്രശ്നമായി മാറും എന്നൊരു രീതി എത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്.
Yeah, because it's really awkward. Everybody's doing it so much that I think it's just become a part or an expectation that it should be there.
Yeah. It's like they don't.
But anyway, to come back to the point, to come back to the point, I think what I wanted to tell Nikhil was that, say to Nikhil was that, if I don't recall his films all that much, but if I remember 7 correctly, I think this title sequence which shows a few shots which are suggestive of what's going on in the film is something that Fincher does. I do think that was the case with Fight Club as well. So he starts off while the title's showing, but what was different about this film, which I did note, was that with both 7 and Fight Club, and those are the only ones I can recall right now, അവരുടെ തുടക്കത്തിൽ while these little shots are there, so you, for example, I think in Fight Club there's ഇങ്ങനെ എന്തൊക്കെയോ സ്മോക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്ന അങ്ങനത്തെ, and in 7 there's photographs and blood splatter, അങ്ങനത്തെ കുറേ random shots. So it's just setting the mood for what's coming in the film, right? But it's very suggestive. ഒന്നും ഡയറക്റ്റ് അല്ല. Whereas ഈ സിനിമ തുടങ്ങിയപ്പോൾ each of the sequences showing a murder he's committed. അതാണ് അതിൻ്റെ തുടക്കം. Like he's putting a bag over somebody's head, somebody else has been pushed off, അങ്ങനെ എന്തൊക്കെയോ പുള്ളി പല രീതിയിൽ ആൾക്കാരെ കൊന്നതിൻ്റെ. So it's not, already it's a little different, right? Where, I mean, I know the movie is called The Killer. I assumed he does those things, right? Our suggestiveness maaritu, it's going into a sort of James Bond territory, right? Where Bond is walking around in the title sequence just shooting people. I don't know, yeah. But anyway, the point being that I think this is something Fincher does generally.
So I think speaking about this a little bit, I was listening to this other podcast on basically English movies which I follow, I think called The Big Picture.
You traitor.
No, so
how dare you plug other work, our competition here.
But I do listen to their podcast quite a bit. So adil I found something very interesting where they were speaking about this point where Fincher is a very very he's very much involved in everything about the movie. Like he's not just the director, but he's also involved in, let's say, the sound department, the writing department, the production design, whatever it is. So ellathilum pulliyude inputs undu basically in the movie, right? So because of that, I feel like all his frames are, so this is a very interesting point which they brought out, in the sense that apparently all his frames are in a way that he completely wants them to be, in the sense that each and everything that you see in the frame is there because he wants it to be there. So there was this beautiful example that they brought out where they're saying Zodiac എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പടത്തിൽ Mark Ruffalo is there in that movie, right? So apparently in one of the scenes he's standing there and then, you know, he's ready for the scene and everything, and then they roll out the scene in the beginning, and then Fincher's all of a sudden he's like cut, and then he comes around, and then Ruffalo thinks that, okay, you know, maybe I did something or maybe I messed up, so he's coming to me to kind of say something. So he walks past Ruffalo, and then there's like an extra standing behind to the right side of Ruffalo, and then he moves him like 2 inches to the left. And then he's like, yeah, let's go again. So that's all he does. But so the point being that he's looking at the screen as not just like, okay, he's not just focusing on the central character or anything, but he's, completely like every bit of the screen he's very much focused on. So angane nokkiyapo because I had already heard this and I was watching this movie, I found it very interesting that I was noticing each and every frame, and I was like, ഈ സാധനം ഈ മരക്കഷ്ണം അവിടെ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പുള്ളി അത് അവിടെ ഉണ്ടാവണമെന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചിട്ടായിരിക്കും അവിടെ ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ടാവുക, തിങ്സ് ലൈക്ക് ദാറ്റ്. സോ
ഇതൊക്കെ പുള്ളിയുടെ മൈൻഡ് ഗെയിംസ് ആയിരിക്കും.
പ്രോബബ്ലി
ചുമ്മാ പുള്ളി ഈ സ്റ്റോറി പുള്ളി തന്നെ തട്ടിവിട്ടിട്ടെ.
പക്ഷെ ഇതൊക്കെ ഐഡിയലി എല്ലാ ഡയറക്ടറും നോക്കേണ്ടതാണ്. വാട്ട് ഷുഡ് ബി ദർ ഇൻ ദ ഫ്രെയിം.
താങ്ക്സ് ഫോർ ഡൂയിങ് എ ജോബ്. പക്ഷേ ഇതൊക്കെ ജസ്റ്റ് ടു ബ്രാഗ് ലിറ്റിൽ ബിറ്റ്, ഇതൊക്കെ ഭരതൻ 70s പണ്ട് ചെയ്ത് വിട്ടതാണ്. ഭരതൻ യൂസ് ടു ഡ്രോ ഈച്ച് ഓഫ് ഹിസ് ഫ്രെയിംസ്. സോ പിക്ചറൊക്കെ ചോട്ട.
അതാ പറഞ്ഞ നമുക്കുണ്ട് ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ആൾക്കാർ എന്നുള്ളൊരു പാരലൽ നമുക്ക് ഡ്രോ
ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. നമുക്ക്
ഇപ്പം ആരാണ്, ജസ്റ്റ് ടു ഡയഗ്രസ്, നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ട ഡയറക്ടർ? പൃഥ്വിരാജ് ആണോ നിന്റെ ഫേവറേറ്റ് ഡയറക്ടർ?
ഈ സംഭവം എനിക്ക് മറ്റേ എന്നാ താൻ കേസ് കൊടുക്കും അതിൽ that was really good.
Just made it much more polite. എന്നാ താൻ കേസ്
കൊടുക്കുമല്ലേ അതോ കൊടുക്കൂ
എന്നാ താൻ കേസ്
കൊടു ഓക്കെ. അതിൽ ആക്ച്വലി ഇതുപോലെ കുറേ ഡീറ്റെയിൽസ് ഉണ്ട്. ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ ആ പ്രാവുകളൊക്കെ ലൈക്ക് മൂവിങ് ഫ്രം വൺ സൈഡ് ടു അതർ സൈഡ് ആൻഡ് അങ്ങനെ കുറേ സംഭവങ്ങളെ ദാറ്റ്. സോ ഫോർ മീ ദീസ് ടു മൂവീസ്, എന്നാ താൻ കേസ് കൊടുക്കൂ and this Mugudanunni Associates, those were my favorite movies last year.
See, I think we're again coming back ഈ സിനിമയെ കുറിച്ച് പറയുമ്പോൾ we're coming back to the point of what is filling up your cinema space, right? There are many things. You don't need to do everything, but you do need to do a few things at least. ഇതിൽ there is that sense that let's go to the interiority, let's go to the voice of the character, let's make him seem. And ഈ ഒരു ടെക്നീക്ക് I think goes back to if you remember seeing any of those noir/neo-noir films like Taxi Driver or Sin City, right? Those are the ones where this person is, their thoughts are with the audience all the time and you really do see the world through them. But what does that require, right? That I think it requires one, that character themselves to be special or in some ways interesting, which I think is where this falls apart. Where this professional is not really an interesting character. Like what makes him interesting to me? I genuinely was not interested in, and his dialogues were really bad for me at least. Like I didn't think they were impressively written dialogues. What the kind of life philosophy that he's trying to dole out. So in the absence of anything else going on and relying entirely on this sort of interiority being voiced out and not being done well, I think this movie really suffers. As opposed to, let's say, if this was done differently where his lover had more of a role or he had more of a dynamic going on with the person who hired him for the job in the first place. Now, I'm not talking about the client, I'm talking about his boss whom he kills. Something, right? Some play off with another character, which simply does not exist till the very end, where completely bizarrely he has it with Tilda Swinton's character. Which is at which point it started feeling like a film, right? He is a silent character, I understand, right? But you don't need dialogue really to show interaction between characters, which is what that whole sequence between him and Tilda Swinton showed. Pulli full time mindada avadi irikkuva. പക്ഷെ that particular series of scenes had something going on. And I think adana missing from the larger film. That what is going on? I don't understand.
I agree with you and disagree with you in the sense that nee parna pole that Tilda Swinton sequence was probably my favorite from the whole movie, where I felt that she is speaking and he is in the frame. He's not really saying anything, but I think at the same time he's also able to kind of express some emotion or some kind of some sort of characterization happens there. But also speaking of, I think that's what Fincher is also trying to show that this man is supposedly supposed to be very clinical, like from in all aspects, not just with his killing, but also in terms of, let's say, പുള്ളി കഴിക്കുന്ന ഭക്ഷണമാണെങ്കിലും, like he's only eating to survive, right? And shout out to all the product placement and all the McDonald's and Amazon and all those ads which come in. But anyway,
so Jeep cars everywhere.
Yeah,
FedEx
Jeep cars, FedEx. Yeah, I think all the proper, like all the big capitalist guys are all in here. They're all like, yeah.
No, that's where it feels like a Netflix movie to me.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a Fincher film at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, I'll have to rewatch his recent works to see if he does it in them. But where these kind of things take, I mean, when they're that visible that, you know, we're seeing it and we're like, oh, it's another product placement. That's when you feel like, oh, something about this thing is off. This doesn't quite feel like the director's call. Maybe the production house is involved. Something.
So coming back to what I was saying, so they show him to be that kind of, you know, a clinical character. Earlier we spoke about how he has double standards, wherein though what he's saying is not really what he's doing. Even in terms of his job, I think he botches up a lot of things that he's trying to do, starting from the initial kill to, you know, later on trying to silently take down that other assassin in Florida. I mean, everything is a little botched up. I mean, he even messes up, you know, sedating the dog and everything, so on and so forth. So I think when he reaches, so having said this, when he reaches the Tilda Swinton character, you know, that's where he kind of also realizes that he didn't really have to live this way, or, you know, because he himself is surprised kind of when he sees, you know, how she's living out in the open, and or she's living the life, or she has whatever she wants, things like that. So I think that's also the point in the movie where he's also like, I don't really have to, you know, kind of cut myself off this way. So I think that was also probably why, like you were saying, he tried to cut down that character, or like shave it to only the essentials, which is what essentially his character is supposed to be. So adeniki thoni.
Right.
I think that's the reason why he spared the client in the last chapter, because of this realization, I think, what you said. And if you notice, I think in the last chapter he doesn't say that default voiceover which he says when he goes for a job. Our voiceover is not there in that last job when he's going to the client. That's what I noticed.
I think we can speak about Fassbender himself a little bit. I generally really like him. I think he's a great actor. I think he's gotten into a particular physique for this role, if I'm not wrong, and everything. But like you were mentioning, while his character is clinical, like he's trying to do all these things, and, you know, probably not the best Fassbender performance I've seen personally, like, or not the movie where I've liked him the most. Though his character doesn't have a lot of dialogues, or doesn't have a lot of you know, this thing to it, probably could have added on a little bit more to it. What do you think?
Is it just me, or Fassbender character, it felt like Fafa for some scenes? I don't know.
Fafa thottu kalikano. No, what do you mean? Go on.
I mean, like, this role could be easily be done by Fafa, I feel. What do you
That's
think?
a interesting take. Yeah, I think Fafa might be able to do this role,
Because
if at all it was a Malayalam movie.
For me, in the initial chapter, അതിലെ കുറച്ച് സീൻസൊക്കെ ഇറ്റ് റിമൈൻഡഡ് മീ ഓഫ് ഫാഫ. ആ കുറച്ച് പുള്ളിയുടെ ഐസ് കാണിക്കൂലേ, അത് കാണിച്ചപ്പോൾ കുറച്ച് എനിക്ക് ഫാഫയുടെ ഒരു ഓർമ്മ വന്നു. ബട്ട്
എനിക്ക് ഫാഫയാണ് ഓർമ്മ വരാ.
കണ്ണുകൊണ്ടുള്ള അഭിനയം, അത് പിന്നെ ഫാഫ
അല്ല, ബട്ട് ലൈക്ക് യു സെഡ്, ഫാസ്ബെൻഡറിൻ്റെ അധികം മൂവീസ് ഞാൻ കണ്ടിട്ടില്ല. മെയിൻ സ്ട്രീം മൂവീസ് കണ്ട, എക്സ്മെൻ, മെയിൻ സ്ട്രീം മൂവീസ് കണ്ടിട്ടുള്ളൂ. പിന്നെ
Inglourious Basterds is there.
Inglourious Basterds,
I think it was the earlier phase of his career.
Yeah, he's there in that. Have you watched this movie called Shame?
I don't think so.
Shame, I've heard.
Yeah, of his films, that's my favorite. Because that's where you realize that what kind of he is. I think a very emotive actor, in the sense that's where he's not good when he's quiet, he's good when he's emoting, which is evident in this film. അവസാനം ടിൽഡ സ്വിന്റർ കൂടെ ഇരിക്കുമ്പോൾ there's very minute things that he's doing. പുള്ളിയുടെ face looks a little stressed, കണ്ണുനീർ, his eyes are tearing up, and that kind of acting is where Fassbender is really good, and that's why he also. So ഇപ്പോൾ പഴയ X-Men movies ഓർമ്മയുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ Ian McKellen used to play Magneto very differently, and then when Fassbender took over, he gave Magneto more than just a villainous vibe. ആ ഒരു vulnerable, and that I have had a history where I've been badly, brutally treated by Nazis. അങ്ങനത്തെ കുറേ emotional depth he brought to the character. So he's very good that way.
I think
Shame കാണുവാണെങ്കിൽ it's actually
go on.
Sorry, let me just finish my point about Shame, which is that Shame actually is very similar to this movie if you look at characters, because Shame, it's mainly him, then he has a sister, and this sister, he's a very solitary character. He lives alone, and he has very meaningless relationships with a lot of women, and then suddenly into his life comes this sister who's very different as a personality. Adana Shame in the basic plot. But adile pullide character is very much like, of course in very superficial ways, but I'm saying he's like this because he doesn't talk much. He doesn't interact with other characters except for, like I said, meaningless relationships and so on. But adile you can see that Fassbender can play that in a completely different way, which is really engaging, as opposed to this, where I think he was asked to be this cold, clinical killer vibe, which doesn't work given his acting strengths.
Also,
I
he
think,
did Steve Jobs.
I was about to say.
Yeah.
So X-Men, first of all, speaking about X-Men, I think X-Men First Class is my favorite X-Men movie. Like, it's really great. I really like Fassbender as Magneto, and it's a joy to watch. And then I was about to speak about Steve Jobs, where there's also another Jobs movie where Ashton Kutcher has acted as Steve Jobs or whatever. But I mean, I genuinely didn't like that movie.
The less said about that, the better.
No, but actually a lot of people say that, that was the better Jobs movie or whatever, but I really don't think so.
I'm sure, but I can't look at Ashton Kutcher and think, Steve Jobs, why not?
Yeah. But Steve Jobs is the movie, it came out in 2015, where Michael Fassbender was Steve Jobs, and I think he did a great job in that movie, because you really resonate with a lot of, there's a lot, and like you were mentioning, he gets a lot of the emotional sequences in that movie, where, he has a lot of an emotional connect with his daughter and stuff like that, and I think the ending of that movie is easily one of the favorite I've seen in recent times. So I think that was my favorite performance of his. പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ഈ പടത്തിലേക്ക് വരുമ്പോൾ I think barring that Tilda Swinton scene, it's not that he did a bad job, but also it's not that this was his best performance or anything of the sort. What do you guys think about that fight scene in
Bruta
in Florida with that guy?
That
the big bulky guy.
എൻ്റെ മോനെ, that is, I think, a good lesson to anyone making cinema in India. While we give നമ്മുടെ cinema the benefit of the doubt that we don't care about physics, I'm not talking about Bollywood sort of these things, right? I'm talking even within നമ്മുടെ own attempts to make so-called realistic cinema. നമ്മുടെ fight sequences are just so elaborate, whereas റിയൽ ലൈഫിൽ അടി കൊണ്ടവർക്ക് അറിയാം ദാറ്റ് ഒരു 2 അടി മതി, മനുഷ്യൻ തളർന്നു പോവും. അത് കൊള്ളുന്നവരും ആയിക്കോട്ടെ കൊടുക്കുന്നവനും ആയിക്കോട്ടെ, ഇറ്റ്സ് നോട്ട്, യു കാൺട്ട് ഫൈറ്റ് ഫോർ ഹാഫ് ആൻ അവർ, റൈറ്റ്? ദാറ്റ്സ് നോട്ട് എ തിങ്. ആൻഡ് ദിസ് റിയലി ഷോസ് ദാറ്റ് ആ ഒരു സോർട്ട് ഓഫ് എന്താ പറയുക, ഭയങ്കര ഡെസ്പറേറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഫൈറ്റാണ്, ബിക്കോസ് കംപ്ലീറ്റ്ലി ഔട്ട് മാച്ച്ഡ് ഇൻ ടേംസ് ഓഫ് ബൾക്ക്. That man is just huge compared to Fassbender, while who has techniques but has nothing to match up. But yeah, that was a great sequence.
That scene where he breaks the wall, that was
yeah, it's a എന്താ ചുറ്റും എന്തുണ്ട് അത് ഉപയോഗിക്കാന്നുള്ള ഒരു സാധനം. because that's the only thing that will help.
There was one funny scene. He takes that ഒരു ഗ്രേറ്റർ പോലത്തെ സാധനം. I thought he
the drawer.
no, there's a greater പോലത്തെ സാധനം. I thought he'll do something but he just throws it and he used this as a distraction. I thought it'll be something like John Wick where he uses that for killing him or something, but
No, so that's what this scene is like. It's got that vibe, spontaneous vibe, right? First of all, extremely well choreographed. Like, it's so great to watch. Like, you know, and then each and every aspect, I can imagine how difficult it must have been to choreograph and shoot with different cameras and edit it. I mean, I think all these things play a factor in that thing coming out so well. And Iparnola, greater scene was funny in the sense that it's all spontaneity, right? So he has no weapon, so he's hoping he'll get like a knife or something, and then when he pulls it out, he finds a grater, and then it's funny. It was well done. I think that scene was really good.
Yeah. I think എനിക്ക് എൻ്റെ ഓർമ്മയിൽ നല്ല ഇങ്ങനത്തെ അല്ല, ഓഫ് കോഴ്സ് ഇത് നല്ല ഒരു ആക്ഷൻ പാക്ട് സാധനമാണ്, പക്ഷേ സംതിങ് ദാറ്റ് റിയലി ഷോസ് ദ ഡെസ്പറേറ്റ്നെസ് ഓഫ് ടു പീപ്പിൾ ഫൈറ്റിംഗ്. എനിക്ക് ലാസ്റ്റ് ഓർമ്മയുള്ളത് ഒന്ന് തൊണ്ടി മുതൽ ദൃക്സാക്ഷി, വേർ സുരാജ് ചേസസ് ഹിം. അതില് അവസാനം ഈ ഒരു ടൈപ്പ് അത് ജസ്റ്റ് തളർന്നു പോയി, ഓടി 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 കിട്ടണില്ല.
last scene when they both are sitting and
മതിയായി.
both are tired and they're like
He's just holding him. He's not running also. He's just like അയാളുടെ മേലെ ഇങ്ങനെ ചാരി നിൽക്കുക. Too good.
But maybe a little more comparable would be ചാപ്പാക്കുരിശ്, വേർ അവരുടെ അവസാനത്തെ ഫൈറ്റ് ഇസ് സംതിങ് ലൈക്ക് ദിസ്, റൈറ്റ്? കൈ കിട്ടുന്ന എന്തെങ്കിലും ആയിക്കോട്ടെ, ജസ്റ്റ് തല്ലാന്നാണ്. ദാറ്റ്സ് ദി ഓൺലി പർപ്പസ്. ദെയർസ് നോ അതർ ലോജിക് ഓർ റീസൺ ഗോയിങ് ഓൺ ഇൻ ദാറ്റ് മൂമെന്റ്.
And also, did you guys notice how I think all the kills specifically in the movie, I think it was meant to be that way, but they are all very sudden. Like pettanna, like kollanna, like be that cab guy. Of course, the first kill was the shot from the window with the sniper, which is where it goes all wrong. But adu kayinittulla kills okay. I think after that he finds that cab guy. He just shoots him like mid-sentence. And then I think the kill is
the lawyer.
I think he kills his lawyer. Yeah, with the nail gun. So there also again goes to show how he's not really very good at his job. He's like, it should take 6 minutes for him to bleed out, and then he just immediately dies. And then he's like, oh shit. And even with that lady, when he's killing her, like just breaks her neck all of a sudden and throws her down the stairs. I think that way the kill sequences were nice. Like ellam ingane pettanayirunnu. I think those things were shot well. And coming back to, I think performance wise, I think Tilda Swinton also was very nice. She was quite good. And my favorite thing about her sequence was where she's tasting the whiskey. I mean, she's having it in like small gulps from me with each glass. But with each glass, you can see how she's getting a little bit drunk. But I don't know how she's portrayed it, but she's not fully drunk. But, she's not completely how she was in the beginning either. So I think she did a really nice job at being obviously the favorite part of the movie. But yeah, go on.
വേറെ ആ ലാസ്റ്റ് ദറ്റ് ഐ ട്വിച്ചിങ് എന്തായിരുന്നു? ലാസ്റ്റ് സീൻ
there is a
Michael Fassbender says that I'm just like you, one of many, and he twitches his eyes.
അതിനൊക്കെ അർത്ഥമുണ്ടോന്ന് അറിയില്ല കേട്ടോ. എനിക്കൊന്നും നമ്മൾ ഈ മാർവൽ സിനിമകൾ കണ്ടിട്ടേ അവസാനം എന്തെങ്കിലും സംഭവിക്കുമ്പോൾ ഇതിനെന്തോ മീനിങ് ഉണ്ട്, സെറ്റപ്പ് ഫോർ സംതിങ് എൽസ്.
മേ ബി
സൈക്കോളജിയിൽ എത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ടോ?
ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ഇത് 5-part നോവലും കണ്ട. സോ മേ ബി
I'm not sure if Fincher is the kind of guy who will make like.
But in the novel also it ends like this. He's retired, but later on he goes back to the job. That's what happens in the novel. That's what I read.
Right.
Fast and Furious ആണോ? One last ride. Continues to make 5 films.
I don't know if the twitching as such has any meaning, but basically goes to show that he is also
But if
pretty
it
much
doesn't
like
have meaning, why did he
everybody else where he wants.
make it like that? Or
അത് അറിയാതെ പറ്റിയതായിരിക്കും ചിലപ്പോ. ഫിഞ്ചർ ഇസ് ലൈക്ക് മതി
ഇത്
ഷോട്ട്.
മറ്റേ
frame കണ്ടില്ല.
പുള്ളി ഇവൻ മറ്റേ പറഞ്ഞ കഥയില്ലേ, മറ്റേ അതേ പറഞ്ഞ ഇവൻ കഥ പറഞ്ഞില്ലേ, എക്സ്ട്രാനെ പോയി മാറ്റിന്. അതന്നെ ഒരു സാധനം ഇടുക, കംപ്ലീറ്റ്ലി അൺഎക്സ്പ്ലെയിനബിൾ. പക്ഷെ ആൾക്കാർ അതിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഇങ്ങനെ ചിന്തിച്ച് തല പുകയ്ക്കണം, അതാണ് ഉദ്ദേശം.
another thing I noted was എല്ലാ ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സിനും പേരും അങ്ങനെയൊന്നുമില്ല സ്പെസിഫിക്കലി. Like he is obviously the killer and apparently this is something I think maybe Americans can relate to or whatever, we can't but whatever names that he does use as his fake names are all names of 70s sitcom characters from American sitcoms. So I mean these are like small Easter eggs which I don't know, I didn't notice it, but apparently people who are like experts would have noticed it or whatever. പിന്നെ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ബട്ട് none of the other characters really have a name. It's like the handler I think that lawyer has a name, but it's like, you know, his lover or whatever, the expert, that Tilda Swinton character is the expert and the brute അങ്ങനെ. So those things were nice, like it was not important, so they just left it as is.
And did you notice എല്ലാ ചാപ്റ്ററിലും is going to some other country or some other place, like every chapter is a new location, Netflix by search.
I think that was a purposeful choice, like I think like ചുമ്മാ നമ്മളെങ്ങനെ കാണിക്കാൻ, and so that you also feel like oh okay you're going with him and things like that. വേറെന്താണ് have we covered the whole movie?
Like I said, the fact that we don't have much to say.
പക്ഷേ I think if we have
Say
read
something
the
about the
novel, maybe it's a true adaptation of the novel. അതുകൊണ്ടായിരിക്കും.
ആയിക്കോട്ടെ, പക്ഷേ ഒരു സിനിമ ഉണ്ടാക്കുമ്പോൾ അത് അതിൻ്റെ രീതിയിൽ ഉണ്ടാക്കണ്ടേ. ഇതിപ്പോൾ എന്താ പറയണേ, ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ ലൈൻ ബൈ ലൈൻ ഒരു സംതിങ് ദാറ്റ് വർക്ക്സ് ഇൻ എ ബുക്ക് മൈറ്റ് നോട്ട് വർക്ക് ഇൻ എ മൂവി. അത് അതിൻ്റെ രീതിയിൽ. ഐ ഹാവ് എ സജഷൻ ഹിയർ. ഗിവൺ ദാറ്റ് വി ആർ ടേക്കിംഗ് ടേൺസ്, ഇപ്പോൾ ഒരാഴ്ച ഞാൻ, ഒരാഴ്ച നിഖിൽ, ഒരാഴ്ച താൻ, ഇങ്ങനെ മൂവീസ് സജസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, നമ്മൾ അവസാനം എത്തുന്ന കൺസെൻസസ് നമുക്കൊന്ന് നോട്ട് ചെയ്യാം. എന്നിട്ട് ആരാണ് ഇവിടെ ഏറ്റവും മോശമായിട്ടുള്ള സജഷൻസ് കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നതെന്ന് നമുക്കൊരു വി ക്യാൻ കം ടു ആൻ ആവറേജ് അറ്റ് ദി എൻഡ് ഓഫ് ഇറ്റ്. ഈ സജഷൻ ആരുടെ ആയിരുന്നു? ജസ്റ്റ് ടു റിക്കോൾ.
ഈ സജഷൻ ഞാനാണ് ചെയ്തത്. പക്ഷേ ഈ സജഷൻ സജസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തത് രാജീവ് വന്നു അല്ല.
Yes.
You gave me two options. This one and RDX and I chose.
എടാ പക്ഷെ ഞാനൊരു കാര്യം പറയട്ടെ, ഓക്കെ forget about the rest of the suggestions, but ഈ പടം we suggested even before it actually came out. So given Fincher's track record and all, like you have to give me benefit of doubt.
അത് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് കാര്യമില്ല. എന്തായാലും താൻ സിനിമ കണ്ടിട്ട് സജസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യില്ലല്ലോ.
You didn't like, so majority ഞങ്ങൾ
ആയിക്കോട്ടെ, അങ്ങനത്തെ കൺസെൻസ് നോട്ട് ചെയ്താൽ മതി.
അതാണ്.
Just so that our viewers or listeners know, while Nikhil is giving Raji shit for having suggested this film through him, Nikhil's own idea was to cover something called Valati. So I think we're much better off.
പക്ഷേ സത്യം പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മൾ ഈ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പടം എടുത്തത് നീ ആദ്യം പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ നമുക്ക് മിക്സ് ചെയ്യാനൊന്നും അല്ലല്ലോ. നമുക്ക് മലയാളം മൂവി പ്രോപ്പർ കിട്ടാത്തതുകൊണ്ടല്ലേ നമ്മൾ സത്യം നമ്മുടെ ഓഡിയൻസിനോട് പറയണ്ടേ.
I think we should kind of speak about how there are really no good Malayalam movies that have come out of late,
especially after we started the podcast.
And good എന്ന് പറയാൻ എന്താണെന്നറിയോ, നമുക്കങ്ങനെ അങ്ങനെ ഭയങ്കര എക്സെപ്ഷണൽ സിനിമ റിവ്യൂ ചെയ്യണമെന്നൊന്നുമല്ല ആഗ്രഹം. പക്ഷേ കാണാൻ തോന്നണ്ടേ? ഈ നെറ്റ്ഫ്ലിക്സ്, പ്രൈം, ഹോട്ട്സ്റ്റാറൊക്കെ എടുത്ത് നോക്കുമ്പോൾ കാണുന്നത് ഒന്നും എനിക്ക് കാണാൻ തോന്നുന്നില്ല. ബിക്കോസ് യു നോ ഇറ്റ്സ് ദാറ്റ് പ്രിസൈസ് മിഡ് ടിയർ സിനിമ വിച്ച് ഇസ് ദ വേഴ്സ്റ്റ് ടു വാച്ച്, റൈറ്റ്? ഷിറ്റാണെങ്കിൽ പിന്നെയും കാണാം, നല്ലതാണെങ്കിൽ ഓഫ് കോഴ്സ് കാണാം. പക്ഷെ ഈ നടുക്കിടക്കുന്ന ഒന്നിനും ഒരു ഫ്ലേവർ ഇല്ലാത്ത കുറേ സിനിമകൾ.
കണ്ണൂർ സ്ക്വാഡ് ഒന്നുമില്ല, ലുക്സ് നൈസ്.
But yeah, I think few movies to look forward to. I think Kannur Squad might be a good one, hopefully. പിന്നെ ഈ വെല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പാടല്ലേ, I think that's also been getting decent reviews. So അങ്ങനെ couple of good movies to look forward to. Hopefully they will be nice. പിന്നെ to all the listeners, like we mentioned, this today was a segment of India വിട്ടു പിടിക്കാം. So ഇതുപോലെ നമുക്ക് വേറെയും സെഗ്മെൻറ്റ്സ് ഉണ്ട് which we are planning so as to make this a little bit more interesting for us and for you. So അങ്ങനെ നമുക്ക് പോകെ കുറച്ചും കൂടി ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റിംഗ് ആയിട്ട് വരാം. But I think we've come to the end of this episode, and I think we had a mixed bag of opinions here and we had fun discussing it. So thanks for joining me, guys, and we hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.